RFK's candidacy more or less represents the total subversion of that censorious paradigm, because he's been 100% subject to that, and in some ways stands as the representative of, you know, thousands of others and doctors and physicians and all kinds of people who've had the courage to stand against that orthodoxy, you know, and it's not even about a particular orthodoxy because the goalposts keep moving. But I think underlying that is also a hubris, like a human hubris to think that we know, and to know so well that we know what's
good for everyone.
Good for everyone, precisely.
And we're confident that the ripple effects of us oppressing people is worth it. And I strongly would suspect that it's not worth it. I think it's much better for people to self-regulate themselves and be like, this person's opinions are stupid, versus let's check the rule book of the things that we're allowed to say and not say.
I can see that kind of like frozen rigidity also shows up, like the kind of people that are selected for and self-selecting to get into political power are not operating under the paradigm of let's hold as much uncertainty as we can, because it's really not advantageous for them to do that.
No, they put up a front their whole lives that they like you said earlier, this hyper high conviction, my policy is the best policy, and my team is the best, my opponent is the worst, even though it's on my same party, and then like the other side is the worst party and candidate if I'm in the general election. Like there's few things that get you more detached from the truth than you kind of growing up in politics and trying to win favor of the masses throughout your life, right? Like all you know is just like, what did the polling data say? And you never develop a soul. You're just a whore for whatever is like hot at a time. And that's just not the kind of person that you want to be leading your country.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm starting to understand this now. Because what you're speaking to, like, I think of Joe Biden, especially, you know, geriatric Joe Biden is the epitome of that circumstance in which you're living through the mask, and who you actually are underneath has been so hollowed out by decades and decades and decades of participating in the mask that, and now the coherency of the mask itself begins to break down with his old age. And I think I understand that's what you're getting at with the horrification of America is effectively something like giving primacy to the mask that gets you somewhere or gets you what you want over what feels true.
Yeah, I mean, I don't respect or believe anything that Joe Biden says. Nothing. I believe that it's he's always saying, oh, well, I shouldn't have said that. And when like randomly he's actually authentic, and who knows how authentic, he's like, oh, my handlers are gonna be upset about, they're gonna get mad at me for that. Like who's getting mad for you? The fucking president. Who's gonna get mad at you for that? For you speaking your mind. But that's the entire like MO of his whole like campaign and team. It's like the super fragile entity that like is barely clinging on to power because it was never, I don't know, it feels like he has so little power. He's like a prisoner to his party. I would need to think about why that's not true for RFK. I think part of why I feel is less true for RFK is because I feel like if RFK loses, he's still gonna be a sovereign individual that like is still gonna speak truth, regardless of whether he's the president or not. That's what it feels like to me. And with Joe Biden, it just feels like his entire goal is not to speak truth or to make a particular positive difference, just to hang on and like make it day by day. In part because he's old, but in part because he, you know, I don't know how much he would admit it. He's a puppet. He's really just a puppet that needs to say certain lines, sign certain documents. What does it say about our country that that's our leader? That we have a truly mindless, I don't want to say whore, like, but he he embodies like a soullessness of America. There's Joe Bidens and all of corporate America, right? That have literally sold out their soul to rise to the top, you know, fuck over their coworkers, like play the game of politics in the workplace. And that's, I think many of these institutions that may have a certain market cap may crumble in the next few years. And a lot of the people that thought that they would get away with having no soul are not going to get away with it at the end of the day. And it's like, even though I have such a strong conviction of that, it is still hard to do what feels right, because the real silent majority has not. I think I'm going to encounter more and more people that are part of like the real like a virtuous silent, I don't want to say majority, it's group that will grow over time. That's like tired of people putting virtue and the truth last, using it as like a tool versus like an end in itself. But there's a lot to talk about with everything I said, but I think that we are going to shift in the coming years to it being a real competitive advantage, to have chosen a hard path that prioritizes virtue over short-term power and profit, and saying whatever to get ahead. Because I think we've just maxed out on bullshit. And the thing about bullshit leaders and organizations is that they don't actually provide value to society, sort of in the way that a legitimate organization built for the highest good can and will. So I guess I'm looking forward to all these different bubbles that all have a common thread kind of bursting, which is going to be very messy, but in the chaos and decay is like a huge opportunity for new networks of support of artists and entrepreneurs and investors, etc., that aren't full of shit, to quickly build stuff that is actually really useful for humanity.
Yeah, you and me both. You and me both. I think what I heard in that last thread is that we are in a confrontation with the content of our souls in this time, and that in some ways is like the deepest reality of all of the levels of instability and polarization and all of the different symptomatic instantiations of that, whether it's addiction or violence or what have you. ultimately there is like a root confrontation with the soul that's occurring. And what you spoke to, the competitive advantage, I mean, your durability, your resilience, right? That's what we talked about last summer. That's the deepest form of resilience. That's the resilience that maintains people under the harshest conditions. And I think it's the only path that will afford a redemptive spirit to rise in America. And that is something that maybe RFK, the thing about RFK is that he's not like Superman at all.
No.
But it's like there's this clear sense that a greater spirit animating the people can move through him and around him. And within that can be that redemptive property as well, which looks to those people who are corrupted, with compassionate confrontation. And truth is confrontative. And there's this whole idea of soul force, soul power. That's really what I think about when I think about MLK. Is like he's allowing the currents of truth to flow through him. And that's what's giving power to his voice. It's not just his skillful manipulation or presentation of himself to achieve that. So yeah, I deeply resonate with that. And I guess the question mark for me is what can I do, or how can I be to afford the reality that RFK represents? And I don't know that actually means, I mean, I did donate to his campaign, but I'm not actually sure that the way this is played is how we usually think about playing it. And whether it's fundamentally
No.
like, oh, I need to like go to America and knock on a bunch of doors, or, just circulate a bunch of stuff. That's how we've kind of done political campaigning, and you've probably
Oh
done a
yeah,
lot more than me.
it's funny because that way of doing political campaigning has always felt so weird, and like this is also just like a pattern in like society today. It's like this thing that never made sense or barely makes any sense and is super inefficient, that it's done because it was done before, and then there's also an industry around it. Oh, it's like maybe we don't do it anymore. I don't know.
Yeah.
And we do
But
something that's like way more hitting at like first principles. What should a campaign, it should inspire people. I remember when Joe was not in a front runner in like 2019, let's say, and I was just like, I've never met a Joe Biden supporter, like a fan, and really what RFK can do is generate real fans.